Why, hello, my loves, and welcome back to Spook Manor. Are you here for an unsolved mystery that haunts with ghostly activity? Then join me as we follow a terrified young woman who awaits for help on a frozen island. It is an icy winter in Maine where our story begins. 30-year-old Janice wakes in the early hours of the morning to prepare for the long day. She resides in the back room of the guest quarters, volunteering to help support this antique treasure, which is known to be the second oldest lighthouse in the state. Being a historic landmark, traveling here is like going back in time. Yes, there is electricity and running water in the lighthouse and guest quarters, but to preserve the authenticity of former times, visitors are encouraged to experience what life was like back in the day, with composting facilities and no public trash receptacles in sight. These are important features which capture a feeling, and Janice loves that this place is kept as historically accurate as possible. But her most fond memories are of sleeping under the stars in the campground, watching the still active lighthouse guide vessels safely away from shore, and exploring one of the 5 hiking trails that this gorgeous island has to offer. Janice would watch wildlife for hours, with osprey, bald eagles, and whales fishing the dark waters. Her favorite place has always been the highest point. The stunning views of mid-coast Maine are impeccable. On clear days, you can see all the way to Reed State Park, Georgetown, and Popham Beach. She grew up listening to the keepers give guided tours of the ancient buildings. The lighthouse itself was commissioned by President George Washington in 1795, and it was then that the first tower was built. Sipping her steaming coffee, Janice stared through the antiquated window at the snow falling gently in the heavy fog, and she wondered if the other caretaker was awake yet. The thick mist reminded her of the importance of the original fog bell, added to the property in 1837. Anyone who has spent a winter in Maine knows how deadly these kind of weather conditions can be. In 1819, the old wooden tower was torn down and replaced with a stone one. It was reported that the station had improved so much due to shipping in the Kennebec and Sheepscot rivers that it became a first-order station in 1853. 4 years later, the current tower and quarters where Janice now resides was erected, and the Fresnel lens was installed. One of her favorite attractions came as a result of the steam engine, and a tramway was built in 1895. The purpose of the structure was to haul coal and minerals to various parts of the island. Yet as the world evolved, electricity came to Seguin, and the steam engine was no longer necessary, which changed technology in the way products needed to be hauled. The old tram was condemned in the mid-1920s, and a new one was built in its place. The newer tram is the one that is still in existence today. It was when tragedy struck. A loving mother was injured, a brave child was saved, and a family dog was lost that the tram was closed to the public by the Coast Guard in 1949. Being the last working tram in the state of Maine today, volunteers have been working diligently each summer to repair it and upkeep the grounds. The cost of repairs is vastly expensive, and it is through generous donations from history lovers and tourists that keep it alive today. It was in 1939 that the U.S. Coast Guard took command of the station, and in 1977 the lighthouse was placed on the historic registry. However, when the light was automated 8 years later, the light was decommissioned. With passion for its rich past and preservation of history, the group known as the Friends of Seguin Light Station was formed in 1986, and they continue to keep this exceptional landmark preserved and open to the public to this day, making it an ideal location for legend trippers, nature lovers, and historians alike. Janice sits patiently as she waits to hear from her dear friend and fellow keeper Dale to reach out to her. She knew this was going to be a big day. It wasn't common for volunteers and keepers to stay during the winter months, but there was some storm damage during the harsh fall, and she decided to stay with him on the island in case he needed an extra hand. Though she would never admit it to him, Dale was getting up there in age. At 70, he was the toughest, wisest man she had ever known. He took up the cause of caring for this majestic place, yet was not the type to ask for help, and she felt pressured to stay by his side in these rustic conditions. As 10 a.m. was approaching, Janice was starting to get concerned. It was not like Dale to be late for anything, and she was getting a sinking feeling in her stomach as the hours passed. She walked through the old guest house. Its age cried out with floorboards that creaked under each step. The heavy snowfall was oppressive and seemed to muffle the sounds of everything around her. The silence was deafening, and the powers seemed to flicker as she made her way across the hall. Downstairs she walked through the museum and gift shop. This place is a different world in the winter compared to the summer months. The frozen, cold landscape is a harsh contrast to the bright sunshine and warm memories of her childhood. Peering out the windows, the sky seemed to be getting darker, and the snowfall much thicker with each passing moment. Not wanting to intrude on Dale too quickly, Janice took her sweet time to get to the keeper's quarters. She made sure to check the lighthouse thoroughly as she went. Several times she had seen something out of the corner of her eye. It resembled a woman in Victorian attire, but as soon as she glanced over, the figure would be gone. It was then that she heard the subtle sound of piano music playing off in the distance. It was so faint that she wondered if she was simply experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations as a result of stress caused by the oppressive and dreary environment. As the repetitious melody got a little louder, she realized it was probably Dale playing the creepy music and called out to him warmly. But no one answered, and the air was suddenly filled again with the same oppressive silence. With a creeping feeling in her spine, Janice quickly made her way to the keeper's cottage, and what she found struck her to the core. Dale lay in his bed, sweating profusely and burning up with a fever. Panic took hold and she rushed to help him. She quickly tried the Coast Guard, but the weather had gotten worse throughout the day, and the outlook for medical help was grim. But Janice was very well trained. Working on these grounds where children and the elderly play taught her precious life-saving survival skills. The hours passed as she sat by his side. She kept him filled with fluids, covered in blankets and tended to his every need. As the sun went down, she was exhausted, with little hope that help would arrive before morning. Thankfully, though, Dale had finally stabilized and was now sleeping peacefully. Intending to distract her mind, Janice sat in a large leather chair and began reading a history book about the lighthouse. As her mind drifted in and out of sleep, the strange piano music could be heard again, still far off in the distance. It was the same tune, playing over and over again. But it was the light going out in the keeper's cottage at 2 a.m. that startled her awake, and she made a mad dash to the window to ensure the lighthouse was still shining. To her relief, it was blasting through the foggy night, brighter than ever, as though providing her with a warm beacon of hope in this dire, witching hour. As the relief took hold, she became aware of the music again. Fearing they were not alone on the island, Janice checked Dale one more time before going on a quest to find the piano and the culprit behind this obsessive-compulsive activity. With flashlight in hand, she followed it. It appeared to be leading her back to the lighthouse. As her search ensued, the sound appeared to be jumping from room to room. Each time she was sure she had found it, upon entering the door, it would be distant again. It was the same tune, played repetitiously over and over again, as though it were stuck on repeat. The continuous melancholy of the music haunted Janice at first, but then it began to test her sanity as it got louder with each passing moment. The fear for Dale's life and tedious, monotonous sound of the piano keys playing tore at her through the darkness of the night for what seemed like hours on end. She grabbed a large metal pipe in anger, intending to smash the instrument when she found it, and started running from room to room, but could not find where the incessant noise was coming from. Fright had taken hold. She had to find it. She had to stop it. But as she reached the hallway stairs, a massive black shadow form of a man, who appeared to be holding something, came bounding down the stairs. The thick black mass of the person was angrily screaming in a male voice, "Stop that devil music, you horrid witch!" Janice stood for a moment in shock, but fight or flight finally took hold, and she chose the latter. Running with all her might to the back door, she could hear the sounds of the piano being smashed to bits, followed by the horrifying screams of a terrified woman. But she didn't look back. Instead, Janice continued to run. She wouldn't allow even the sharp pains in her side to slow her down. Nearly out of breath from the lack of oxygen and the harsh, freezing air piercing at her lungs, Janice made it safely to Dale's room and nearly fainted as she locked the door behind her. Dale sat up, looked at her with wide eyes and a concerned expression on his face. Upon inquiring as to what had happened, Janice began to cry and hysterically recounted her encounter with the mysterious apparition by the staircase and the haunting music. To her utter amazement, Dale began to laugh, and Janice tried to compose herself. With a clammy, pale face and pain from his illness, Dale calmly shifted under the heavy quilt before explaining. There is an urban legend that sometime in the mid-1800s, a new caretaker and his wife stayed here alone to maintain the lighthouse. Cabin fever is a common occurrence when you're all alone on an island, especially in those times. Because of this, according to the lore, the husband bought a piano for his lovely wife to play as a comfort to them throughout the long and lonely winter months. Sadly, though, the wife was either not skilled, knew only one song, or perhaps only had one sheet of music. But whatever the case may be, she only played that one tune over and over again. What should have been a light to their lives was now driving the husband mad. One day, he couldn't take it anymore. He lost his mind and smashed the piano to pieces with his axe. But the man's mental derangement didn't stop there. In his frenzy to stop the melody, he turned to his terrified wife and took her life. Once the man realized what he had done, he took his own life, and the couple haunt the lighthouse to this very day. Janice sat in disbelief. Why had she not heard of this before? Quickly, she grabbed the history book from the leather chair and flipped it to the page noting each caretaker who had lived here throughout the 19th century. Handing it to Dale, she asked which keeper it was. Dale casually waved it away and said, "There's no record of this ever happening. No news reports or evidence has ever been found. The only proof is in the stories from people who experienced the haunting firsthand. People like you, me, and other longtime patrons who have worked here. Sometimes guests will ask about the strange music, but what can you say? Please, don't be afraid, my dear. These spirits are harmless and have never been known to cause any trouble. Just a little annoyance with their music every once in a while," he added with a chuckle. As the evening passed, Dale slept well, and help arrived early the very next morning. But Janice sat up through the night, listening to the repetitious piano music of the lighthouse ghosts. She wondered of their true story, where they had come from, how they had come to this place, and how they truly had died. She wondered if the couple were Civil War spies who were caught or in hiding, and questioned if the reason that their deaths went unreported was some sort of a strange cover-up. It is a mystery, and one that she knew would likely never be solved. So tell me, my loves, is the Seguin Lighthouse truly haunted by a ghostly couple and their torturous tune? Would you, in fact, stay there to find out? Please comment down below and like and subscribe for more fictional stories that are often of actual urban legends and sometimes have historical reference. See you next week and have a good night.